She was only 8 years old when the world forced her to grow up overnight. Under the burning Lagos sun, a small girl stood trembling at the golden gate of the richest mansion on the street. A heavy sack of yams balanced on her fragile head. Her knees were bleeding. Her hands were shaking. Behind her, a hospital bed waited for a mother whose life depended on money she did not have. Ahead of her, armed guards looked at her like she was nothing. Just as she was pushed away in shame, the massive gate opened. Inside that mansion, among marble floors and crystal lights, the little girl saw something that stopped her heart cold, a framed photograph on the wall. It was her mother's face. What secret had been buried for 8 long years, and why was her mother's picture hanging in a billionaire's private room? Before the story continues, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The hospital sat quietly on a crowded street in mainland Lagos, its cracked walls stained by years of humidity and neglect. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mixed with sweat, fear, and resignation. It was the kind of place where hope often came with conditions and where money decided who lived a little longer and who did not. In one of the small wards, a narrow metal bed stood by the window. On it lay Amara, a thin woman in her early 30s, her skin hot with fever, her breathing shallow and uneven. A faded white sheet covered her frail body. Beads of sweat clung to her forehead, and every breath looked like a struggle she was slowly losing. Sitting beside the bed was her daughter Zuri. Zuri was only 8 years old, but her eyes carried a tired wisdom no child should have. She sat very still on the plastic chair, her small fingers wrapped tightly around her mother's hand. Amara's palm felt cold, almost lifeless, and Zuri squeezed it gently as if afraid that letting go might make her disappear. The ceiling fan above them creaked as it turned, pushing warm air around the room. Other patients lay nearby, some groaning softly, others staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes. Zuri had learned something important over the years. Crying did not change anything here. Tears did not buy medicine. Tears did not convince doctors. Tears did not save lives. So she didn't cry. She leaned closer to her mother and whispered, her voice barely louder than her own breathing. "Mommy, please wake up, I'm here." Amara did not respond. Moments later, footsteps echoed down the hallway. A man in a white coat stopped at the foot of the bed. His name badge read, Dr. Chinedu Okoye. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that came from delivering the same bad news over and over again to people who had nothing left to give. "Good afternoon, young lady," he said gently. Zuri stood up immediately, smoothing the wrinkles on her worn school dress. "Good afternoon, sir." Dr. Okoye flipped through a brown medical file, scanning the pages slowly. He sighed before speaking again. "Your mother's condition is stable for now," he said. "The fever has reduced slightly, but she still needs more tests and stronger medication. Without them, her condition could worsen very quickly." Zuri nodded, clinging to every word like it was a lifeline. "Okay, sir." The doctor hesitated. He had seen this moment too many times. He adjusted his glasses and lowered his voice. "There is a problem," he continued. "The hospital bill has reached 45,000 naira. If the payment is not made by 800 tomorrow morning, we will have no choice but to stop the treatment." The words hit Zuri like a physical blow. 45,000 naira. Her heart sank deep into her chest. She did the math instantly. She didn't have 5,000. She didn't even have 1,000. The small coins in her pocket could barely buy bread. Still, she lifted her chin. "Sir, please," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "Please don't stop treating my mommy. I will get the money, I promise." Dr. Okoye looked at her, truly looked at her. A child standing alone in a hospital ward, negotiating for her mother's life like an adult. His eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is a hospital, not a charity. We have rules." Zuri swallowed hard, forcing the lump in her throat down. I understand, sir. Please, just give me until tomorrow morning. I will bring the money. The doctor studied her face for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp, he said. If the money is not here, we will discharge her. Thank you, Sir, Zuri whispered. Dr. Okoye walked away, leaving the room heavy with silence. Zuri sat back down beside her mother. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. She leaned forward and kissed Amara's forehead gently. Don't worry, Mommy, she whispered. I will get the money, I promise. She meant every word. Outside the hospital, the sun was already beginning to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Zuri walked home, alone, her mind racing. Their apartment was not far, just one small room tucked behind a row of shops. The paint on the walls peeled like old skin and the ceiling bore dark stains from years of leaking rainwater. But it was home. Zuri pushed the door open and stepped inside. The silence hit her immediately. No humming from the kitchen, no gentle voice calling her name, no sound of yams roasting on the small kerosene stove. She walked to the corner of the room where a large brown sack rested against the wall. Yams, her mother's livelihood. Amara sold yams by the roadside every evening. That was how they paid rent. That was how they ate. That was how Zuri went to school. Zuri bent down and tried to lift the sack. It barely moved. She tried again, using all her strength. The sack shifted slightly, her arms ached, her back burned. But she did not stop. Inch by inch, she dragged it toward the door until it finally tipped outside. She tied the top with a rope the way her mother always did. Then slowly, carefully, she lifted the sack onto her head. The weight forced her neck to bend to one side, but she steadied herself. She had watched her mother do this countless times. If her mother could do it, so could she. Zuri stepped onto the road. She did not turn toward the poor streets she knew so well. She knew those people. They struggled like her. They had kind hearts but empty pockets. Instead, she turned toward Victoria Island, the place of tall gates, clean streets, and people who never asked the price of anything. It was far. The sun was unforgiving. People stared as she passed. Some shook their heads, some whispered. No one offered help. But Zuri kept walking. Because tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, her mother's life would be decided. And an 8-year-old girl had already made up her mind to fight the world for it. The road toward Victoria Island felt longer with every step Zuri took. The sack of yams pressed heavily against her small head, sending sharp pains down her neck and spine. Sweat rolled down her temples and soaked into the collar of her faded school uniform. Each time she shifted the load to regain balance, her arms trembled, but she refused to stop. She could not stop. Behind her lay a quiet one-room apartment filled with memories. Ahead of her waited a world that did not know her name and did not care about her pain. Yet it was the only place left where money lived freely. And money was the only thing standing between her mother and a hospital discharge slip. Zuri remembered that room clearly, the cracked cement floor that always felt cold at night, the peeling paint that flaked onto their plates when it rained, the small gas stove her mother cleaned every morning like it was something precious. That room had never been beautiful, but it had always been warm. It had always smelled like roasted yams and palm oil. It had always echoed with Amara's voice, humming, laughing softly, reminding Zuri to wash her hands or finish her homework. Now it was silent. Zuri had stood in the doorway earlier, staring at the sack of yams for a long time before touching it. For a moment she had hesitated. Those yams were supposed to last the week. Selling them all in one day meant they would have nothing to eat tomorrow. But then she remembered her mother's face under the thin hospital sheet, and the hesitation disappeared. Now, as she walked under the open sky, Zuri's thoughts drifted back to the many evenings she had sat by the roadside with her mother. Amara would arrange the yams, neatly wipe the dust off them, and smile warmly at every passerby. People buy more when you greet them kindly, her mother used to say. Zuri tried to remember that as she approached the edge of Victoria Island. The change was immediate. The dusty roads gave way to smooth tar. Streetlights stood tall and clean. Trees lined the streets like decorations. Cars passed silently, their windows rolled up, their drivers lost in worlds far removed from hunger and hospital bills. Zuri adjusted the sack on her head and took a deep breath. She walked up to the first house. The gate was tall black and crowned with sharp metal spikes. She knocked gently, afraid to make too much noise. After a moment, a small window slid open. A security guard peered down at her with narrowed eyes. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. "Good afternoon, Sir," Zuri said politely, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I'm selling fresh yams." The guard laughed, a short, mocking sound. "Are you mad?" he said. "Does this look like a market to you? Go away before I call the police." The window slammed shut. Zuri flinched but did not respond. She turned and walked to the next house. At the second gate, a woman opened it herself. She wore expensive clothes and held a phone to her ear. When she saw Zuri, her face twisted in disgust. "Why is this dirty child knocking on my gate?" she snapped. "Go away. I don't want anything from you." She shut the gate without waiting for an answer. Zuri's chest tightened. She swallowed hard and moved on. At the third house, a young man opened the gate. He looked at the sack on her head and then at her small frame. For a moment, something like pity crossed his face. "What are you selling, little girl?" he asked. "Yams, sir," Zuri replied. 500 naira per tuber." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out 1,000 naira note. "Take this," he said. "Keep the yams. Buy yourself something to eat." Zuri's eyes widened. "Thank you, sir," she said quickly. "God bless you." He nodded and closed the gate. The afternoon stretched on. Zuri knocked on gate after gate. Some people bought 1 yam. Some bought 2. A few handed her money without taking anything. Others insulted her, calling her a nuisance, a beggar, a street child who didn't belong there. With each rejection, the sack grew lighter and heavier at the same time. By evening, her legs ached. Her shoulders burned. Her feet felt like they were on fire. She stopped beneath a tree and counted the crumpled notes in her pocket. 18,000 naira. It was more money than she had ever held in her hands at once, but it was not enough. Zuri stared at the remaining yams and felt a familiar wave of fear rise in her chest. Tomorrow morning was coming too fast. The doctor's voice echoed in her mind. 8 o'clock. She lifted her eyes, and that was when she saw it. At the far end of the street stood a mansion unlike anything she had seen before. White pillars rose toward the sky. A golden gate shimmered in the fading sunlight. A long driveway curved inward, lined with perfectly trimmed flowers. The house looked unreal, like something from television. Zuri's heart began to pound. "This is my last chance," she whispered to herself. She adjusted the sack one final time and walked toward the gate. Before she could knock properly, 2 security guards stepped forward. "What do you want?" one of them barked. "Please, Sir," Zuri said quickly. "I'm selling yams. Can I speak to the owner of the house?" The guards exchanged looks. "Are you joking?" the other guard scoffed. "Do you know whose house this is?" Zuri shook her head. "This is the house of Tunde Adeyemi," the guard continued, "one of the richest men in Lagos. He doesn't see people like you." Zuri's voice trembled, but she did not back away. "Please," she said. "My mother is sick. I need money for her hospital bill. Just let me try." The guards reached for her arms. Inside the mansion, Tunde Adeyemi sat in his private study, his phone pressed to his ear. Contracts covered his desk. His voice was sharp, impatient. "I don't care what the board thinks," he said. "If they don't agree, I walk away." As he spoke, his eyes drifted toward the window. That was when he saw her, a small girl struggling against two guards, a sack on her head, tears streaking her dusty face as she begged. Something twisted in his chest. "I'll call you back," he said abruptly, ending the call. Tunde stood up and walked toward the door. At the gate, the guards froze when they saw him approaching. They released Zuri immediately. "What is going on here?" Tunde asked calmly. "She's disturbing us, sir," one guard replied quickly. "We were sending her away." Tunde looked at Zuri. She stood there, shaking her eyes red but defiant. "Let her in," he said. The guards stared at him in shock. "I said let her in." The gate opened. Zuri stepped inside, unaware that with that single step her life and her mother's was about to change forever. Zuri walked slowly into the compound, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The gate closed behind her with a deep metallic sound, separating her from the street she knew and sealing her inside a world that felt unreal. The driveway was smooth beneath her worn sandals. Flowers bloomed on both sides in perfect rows, their colors bright and alive. A fountain stood in the center of the compound, its water flowing endlessly, a quiet reminder that here nothing ever seemed to run out. Zuri tightened her grip on the sack of yams. She felt small, out of place, like a shadow that had wandered into someone else's dream. The man who had ordered the gate opened walked toward her. He was tall, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark trousers, yet there was no mistaking the authority in his posture. His face was serious, but his eyes held something softer, curiosity, maybe even concern. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Zuri, sir," she replied, lowering her eyes respectfully. "Zuri," he repeated slowly as if testing the sound. "How old are you?" "8 years old, sir." The man exhaled sharply. "8," he said again, quieter this time. "And you're out here selling yams alone?" Zuri nodded. "Yes, sir. My mother is sick." The man gestured for her to follow him farther inside, away from the gate and the guards. They walked until they reached the front steps of the mansion. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. "Amara, sir." "And where is she now?" "At the hospital," Zuri replied. "The doctor said if I don't pay 45,000 naira by tomorrow morning, they will stop treating her." The words tumbled out of her mouth quickly, as if she was afraid they might be taken away if she spoke too slowly. The man's jaw tightened. "How much have you been able to raise?" he asked. Zuri reached into her pocket and brought out the folded, sweaty notes. She counted them carefully, her fingers trembling. 18,000 naira, sir." Silence followed. The man looked at the money, then at the sack on her head, then back at her face. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the polished armor of wealth and control he wore so naturally. "Come inside," he said at last. "You look exhausted." Zuri hesitated. "Sir, I don't want to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me," he replied firmly. "Come." He led her through the massive front door. The inside of the mansion was even more overwhelming than the outside. The floor gleamed like glass. Large paintings lined the walls. A crystal chandelier hung above them, catching the light and scattering it like stars across the room. Zuri's mouth fell open before she could stop herself. She had never seen anything like this. "Sit here," the man said, pointing to a soft couch in the sitting room. "I'll go get my wallet." "Yes, sir," Zuri whispered. She sat down carefully, afraid that even her breathing might damage something. She placed the sack of yams gently on the floor beside her and folded her hands in her lap. Her heart raced. For the first time that day, hope began to feel real. As the man walked down the hallway toward his study, Zuri's eyes wandered around the room. Everything was clean, perfect, silent. It felt like a place where pain did not exist. Then she noticed the door. It was slightly open. At first, she didn't mean to look. But something drew her toward it, a quiet pull she didn't understand. She stood up slowly and took a few careful steps closer. Through the narrow opening, she could see part of a large room, a desk, shelves filled with books, and on the wall behind the desk, a photograph. Zuri leaned forward, squinting, her breath caught in her throat. The photograph showed a young woman standing by the sea. She wore a yellow dress that fluttered in the wind. Her hair was long and dark, her smile gentle, her eyes warm. Zuri's hands began to shake. She knew that face. She had seen it every day of her life in the mirror of a small apartment, in faded memories, in the tired smile that greeted her every morning. It was her mother. "No," Zuri whispered. She pushed the door open slightly wider. The photograph was large, framed, carefully placed in a position of honor. This was not a random picture. This was not something forgotten in a corner. This picture mattered. Zuri stepped into the study, her legs moving on their own. She stood directly in front of the photograph, staring up at it as if it might speak. "That's my mommy," she whispered. Behind her, the man had returned. "Zuri," he said, confused. "What are you doing in here?" She turned slowly to face him. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and disbelief. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling, "why is my mommy's picture in your house?" The room went silent. The man froze. His eyes followed her pointing finger to the photograph on the wall. His face drained of color, his lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, it was as if time itself had stopped. "Your mother," he finally whispered. "Yes, sir," Zuri said. "Her name is Amara, that's my mommy." The man staggered back slightly, as if someone had struck him. His breath came unevenly. His eyes filled with tears he did not seem prepared for. "Amara," he whispered again, his voice breaking. Zuri watched him, confused and frightened. She didn't understand why a stranger would react this way to her mother's picture. Before either of them could speak again, sharp footsteps echoed from the hallway. "What is going on here?" An older woman stood in the doorway. She was tall and elegant, dressed in expensive clothes that spoke of old money and unquestioned authority. Her eyes were cold, her expression hard. She looked at Zuri with open disgust. "Who is this dirty child?" she demanded. "And why is she in my son's study?" The man turned toward her, startled. "Mother, I don't care who she is," the woman snapped. "Get her out of here, now!" Zuri took a step back, fear flooding her chest. "But Ma," she began. "I said get out," the woman shouted. She grabbed Zuri's arm and dragged her toward the door. Zuri cried out in pain, her grip on the sack slipping. "Please," Zuri sobbed. "I'm not lying, that's really my mommy." "She's trying to manipulate you," the woman said coldly to her son. "She's a scammer." "No, mother, stop," the man shouted, but it was too late. The woman pulled Zuri through the sitting room and shoved her toward the gate. "Throw her out," she ordered the guards, "and make sure she never comes back." The gate opened and Zuri was pushed outside. She fell to the ground, scraping her knee. The sack of yams landed beside her. The gate slammed shut. Zuri sat there crying, her heart shattered, her body aching. But she wiped her tears. She still had a mother to save. The walk back to the hospital felt longer than the journey to the mansion. Zuri limped along the roadside, her knee throbbing with every step. Dust clung to her skin, mixing with dried tears on her cheeks. The sack of yams felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what had just happened. The golden gate, the cold woman, the photograph, the way the man's face had changed when she said her mother's name. None of it made sense. By the time Zuri reached the hospital, the sky had darkened. The corridor lights flickered weakly as she hurried toward the reception desk, clutching the money in her pocket like a lifeline. "Please, Ma," she said breathlessly to the nurse on duty. "This is for my mommy's bill." The nurse counted the money carefully, then shook her head. "It's not enough," she said. The total is 45,000. I know, Zuri replied quickly. But please take this for now. I'll bring the rest tomorrow morning, I promise. The nurse sighed, studying the girl's scraped knee and tired eyes. Okay, she said finally. But if the balance is not paid by 8 a.m., treatment stops. Yes, Ma. Thank you, Missouri said, already turning away. She ran down the hallway and pushed open the door to her mother's room. Amara was awake. She sat up slightly in bed, her face pale but her eyes open. When she saw Zuri, relief flooded her expression. Zuri, she whispered. Where have you been? I was so worried. Zuri dropped the sack and rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her mother. Mommy, you're awake, she said, her voice cracking. Amara stroked her daughter's hair gently. You shouldn't have gone out so late. You're just a child. Zuri pulled back, her eyes shining with determination. I had to, Mommy. The doctor said if we don't pay, they'll stop treating you. Amara's gaze fell to Zuri's knee, now stained with blood and dust. What happened to you? She asked sharply. Why are you hurt? Zuri climbed onto the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. Mommy, something strange happened today. Amara stiffened. What kind of strange? Zuri began to speak slowly, carefully, choosing her words. She talked about the rich streets, the gates that slammed shut the one man who gave her money. Then she described the biggest mansion she had ever seen. The guards didn't want me there, Zuri said. They were pulling me away. But then a man came out. He stopped them. He was tall, Mommy. He wore a white shirt. He had kind eyes. Amara's fingers tightened around the sheet. He asked me my name, Zuri continued. He asked why I was selling yams. I told him about you. He said he would help me. Amara's breathing became shallow, and then she whispered. He took me inside, Zuri said. Mommy, the house was so beautiful, like the ones on TV. He told me to wait while he went to get his wallet. Zuri hesitated, then lowered her voice. Mommy, I saw a picture on the wall. Amara's heart began to race. What picture? Zuri met her eyes. It was you. The room seemed to tilt. Amara's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened in terror. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Yes, Mommy, Zuri said softly. You were younger, wearing a yellow dress, standing near the sea. It was you. I asked him why your picture was in his house. Amara's body began to shake. What did he say? She asked. He didn't answer, Zuri replied. He just stared at me. He started crying. Then an old woman came. She was very angry. She called me a liar. She dragged me out of the house and told the guards to throw me away. Amara broke down. She covered her face and sobbed, her shoulders trembling violently. Zuri stared at her in fear. Mommy? What's wrong? She cried. Why are you crying? Amara tried to steady herself, but the past had already crashed into the present. She reached for Zuri's hands and held them tightly. Zuri, she said urgently, we need to leave this hospital tonight. Zuri's eyes widened. What but, Mommy? You're still sick. I don't care, Amara said, panic flooding her voice. We need to leave Lagos. We need to go somewhere far away. Why, Zuri asked, her voice shaking. Who are we running from? Amara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. The man you met today, she said quietly. Do you remember his face? Zuri nodded. Yes. Amara swallowed hard. That man is your father. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Zuri froze. My father, she whispered, but you told me he died. Amara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I lied, she said. I had to protect you, protect me from what Zuri asked. Amara pulled her daughter close, her voice trembling. From his mother. Zuri pulled back in confusion. The old woman, yes, Amara said. She is dangerous. 8 years ago, when she found out I was pregnant, she threatened to kill you. Zuri's breath caught. Kill me. Amara nodded slowly. She came to my room at night, she continued. She told me if I didn't leave her son, she would make sure you never lived to be born. She said she had the power to make us disappear. Zuri's mind spun. So that's why we're poor, that's why we ran away. Yes, Amara whispered. I chose your life over everything else. Zuri stared at her mother, her chest tight with emotions she didn't know how to name. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed outside the door. Amara's face drained of color. Oh no, she whispered. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was the man from the mansion, her father. His eyes were red and swollen, his hair was unkempt, his suit was wrinkled. He looked like someone who had been crying for hours. Amara, he said, his voice breaking. It's really you. Amara tried to sit up, panic gripping her. Please, you need to leave. No, he said firmly, stepping closer. No more running. I need answers. Zuri stood frozen between them. Amara took a deep breath. Your mother threatened to kill our baby, she said quietly. The man staggered as if struck. What he whispered. She told me she would destroy us, Amara continued, so I ran. The man's hands clenched into fists. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. But I swear to you, things are different now. He turned to the doctor. What is the bill? 45,000 naira, the doctor replied. I'll pay everything the man said right now. And I want the best care. Zuri watched as her father knelt before her. I'm so sorry, he said. I should have protected you. For the first time, Zuri whispered, Daddy. And in that moment, a broken family began to heal even as danger still lurked in the shadows. The hospital room fell into a heavy, trembling silence. Amara lay back against the thin pillow, her chest rising and falling too quickly as if her body could no longer decide whether to fight or flee. Zuri stood beside the bed, her small fingers gripping the metal rail. Her eyes moving back and forth between the two adults whose pain filled the room like smoke. The man, her father, straightened slowly after kneeling in front of Zuri. His hands were shaking not with weakness but with the weight of everything he had just learned. 8 years. 8 years stolen by fear, lies, and a mother who believed control was love. I didn't know, he said again, his voice hoarse. Amara, I swear to you I didn't know. Amara turned her face away, tears sliding silently into her hair. Knowing or not knowing did not erase the years of struggle. It did not change the nights she had slept hungry so her child could eat. It did not erase the terror that had lived in her bones since the night she ran away. You don't understand, she said weakly. Your mother doesn't make empty threats. I understand now, he replied. And I won't let her touch you, either of you, ever again. Dr. Okoye cleared his throat, gently breaking the tension. Sir, the transfer has come through, he said, glancing at his tablet. The bill is settled in full. We'll continue treatment immediately. Relief washed over Zuri like a wave. Her legs almost gave out. Thank you, Amara whispered, though her eyes still held fear. But money isn't the real problem. I know, the man said quietly. My name is Tunde, and I'm not here to fix things with money alone. He turned to Zuri and lowered himself again, meeting her at eye level. I should have been there when you took your first steps, he said. When you said your first word, when you went to school for the first time. I missed all of it. Zuri studied his face closely, searching for something familiar. You look like me, she said softly. Tunde let out a broken laugh, tears filling his eyes. Yes, he said. And you look like your mother. Zuri hesitated, then leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. It was an awkward hug, uncertain but sincere. Tunde held her carefully as if afraid she might disappear. For the first time since she was born, Zuri felt the presence of something she had never known she was missing. A father. Later that night, after the nurses had adjusted Amara's medication and the ward grew quiet, Tunde sat alone in his car outside the hospital. The city lights blurred through his windshield as his mind replayed everything he had seen. The photograph on his wall. the little girl selling yams at his gate. The name he had whispered into the dark for 8 long years. Amara. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Across the city, in a mansion that never truly slept, a woman sat upright in bed, her eyes sharp even in the dim light. Modupe Adeyemi answered the phone on the second ring. "Yes," she said coolly. Mother Tunde said, "We need to talk." There was a pause. "About the child?" she asked. Tunde's jaw tightened. "About the woman you threatened? About the daughter you tried to erase?" Modupe's voice hardened. "That girl is not my granddaughter. She is my child," Tunde replied firmly. "And Amara is the woman I love." "You're being manipulated," Modupe said dismissively. "That woman trained the child well." "Enough," Tunde said. "I'm not the boy you controlled 8 years ago." Modupe laughed softly. "You think money makes you powerful? Everything you have still traces back to this family." Tunde closed his eyes. "Then consider this the moment it stops." The line went dead. Back at the hospital, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound made her tense. Every shadow reminded her of the night she ran. Zuri slept curled beside her, her breathing soft and even unaware of the storm gathering beyond the walls. In another part of the city, Modupe stood before a mirror adjusting her silk robe. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with something dark. She picked up her phone and dialed another number. "Chief," she said smoothly, "I need information." The next morning, Tunde returned to the hospital early, carrying bags of food, clothes, and a small toy he had bought without knowing why. Zuri's face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy." She called the word, rolling off her tongue more easily this time. Amara watched from the bed, her heart torn between joy and dread. As they ate together, Tunde spoke of plans, a quiet apartment in Lekki, tighter security, doctors he trusted. He spoke with confidence, but Amara could still hear the uncertainty beneath it. "She won't stop," Amara said softly. "Your mother?" Tunde met her gaze. "Neither will I." Outside the hospital, unseen but patient, danger began to move. And for the first time it had met its match. The next few days passed in a strange, fragile calm. Each morning, Tunde arrived at the hospital before the sun fully rose. He brought warm food wrapped carefully in foil, fresh clothes for Amara, and small gifts for Zuri, books. Pencils, a soft toy that Zuri slept with every night. He never came empty-handed, but more importantly, he never came late. For Zuri, his presence slowly became something solid. At first, she watched him closely, as if afraid he might disappear the moment she blinked. But as the days went by, her fear softened. She told him about her school, about the teacher who liked her handwriting, about the days she missed class to help her mother sell yams. Each story cut Tunde a little deeper. He listened without interrupting, his hands clenched together, his jaw tight. Every laugh Zuri shared carried a shadow because it came from a life he had not been there to protect. "I didn't know it was so hard," he admitted one afternoon as they sat beside Amara's bed. Zuri looked up at him. "It was okay," she said simply, "as long as Mommy was there." Amara turned her face away, tears welling in her eyes. At night, when Zuri slept, Amara and Tunde spoke in hushed voices. "You don't understand my mother," Amara said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't lose." "She will this time," Tunde replied. "I've built my own companies. I don't need her money anymore." Amara shook her head slowly. "Money isn't her greatest weapon. Fear is." Tunde had no answer to that. Across the city, Modupe Adeyemi sat in her private sitting room, her phone resting in her palm. The man she had called Chief Ogunle stood before her, bowing slightly. "I found her," he said. "Amara. She's at a public hospital on the mainland. She has a daughter." Modupe's lips curved into a thin smile. "I know about the child." And your son, the chief asked carefully. He's already involved, Modupe replied coldly, which is why we need to act fast. Back at the hospital, Dr. Okoye entered Amara's room with a small smile. You're responding well to treatment, he said. If things continue like this, you can be discharged in 3 days. Zuri clapped her hands softly. Mommy, we're going home. Tunde smiled, but the word home no longer meant the same thing. I've arranged a place, he said gently. Somewhere safe. Amara hesitated. Safe from whom? Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was his assistant, sir, the voice said urgently. Your mother wants to see you. She says it can't wait. Tunde closed his eyes briefly. I'll be there, he said. He turned back to Amara. She had gone pale. She knows, Amara whispered. Tunde took her hand. Let me handle this. When Tunde arrived at the mansion, Modupe was waiting for him in the grand sitting room, dressed impeccably as always. Sit, she commanded. I'll stand, Tunde replied. Modupe's eyes narrowed. I know about the girl. She's your granddaughter, Tunde said. She is nothing, Modupe snapped. That woman trapped you once, and now she's back to finish the job. That woman almost died in a public hospital. Tunde said coldly. Because of you, Modupe laughed softly. I protected you. You threatened to kill my child, Tunde said, his voice shaking with rage. You destroyed my family. If you continue this foolishness, Modupe said, standing, I will cut you off completely. Tunde smiled bitterly. You're 8 years too late. He turned toward the door. If you walk out, Modupe warned, don't come back. Tunde paused, but only for a second. Goodbye, mother. He drove straight back to the hospital. That night, Amara lay awake, listening to Zuri breathe beside her. She knew the past was closing in again. But this time, she was not alone. The day Amara was discharged from the hospital arrived quietly without ceremony. The morning air was cool and pale sunlight filtered through the hospital windows as nurses moved in and out of rooms, pushing carts and murmuring instructions. Amara sat upright on the bed, dressed in clean clothes Tunde had brought the night before. She looked stronger than she had days earlier, but the tension in her eyes had not faded. Zuri stood beside her, holding a small bag that contained all their belongings. Are you ready, Mommy? She asked, trying to sound cheerful. Amara forced a smile. Yes, my love. Tunde arrived shortly after, carrying the final discharge papers. When he walked into the room, Zuri ran to him without hesitation and hugged his waist tightly. You promised you wouldn't be late, she said. I promised, Tunde replied, lifting her gently. And I keep my promises. Amara watched them, her heart aching with emotions she didn't know how to untangle. Happiness, gratitude, fear. Outside, Tunde's car waited. As they drove away from the hospital, Amara looked back through the rear window until the building disappeared from view. It felt like leaving one kind of danger for another. The apartment in Lekki was nothing like the room they had lived in before. It stood inside a quiet estate with guarded gates, trimmed hedges, and streets that felt almost too calm. Inside, the apartment had 3 bedrooms, a spacious sitting room, a modern kitchen, and a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. Zuri's eyes grew wider with every step. This is really where we're staying? She asked, running from room to room. Yes, Tunde said softly. This is home now. Zuri dropped her bag and spun around the living room, laughing freely for the first time in days. Amara stood still in the doorway, overwhelmed. Tunde. This is too much, she said quietly. We don't need all of this. Tunde walked over to her. You've lived with too little for too long, he replied. Let me take care of you. Please. She wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But another part remembered Modupe's voice in the dark. That evening, after Zuri fell asleep in her new bed, Amara and Tunde sat on the balcony. The city lights flickered below them like distant stars. I never stopped loving you, Amara said softly. Even when I ran, even when I tried to forget, my heart never let you go. Tunda reached for her hand. I searched for you. Every woman I met I compared to you. None of them were you. For a moment the past loosened its grip, but across town Modupe Adeyemi sat in her bedroom, her phone pressed to her ear. Follow them, she said calmly. I want to know everything. The next morning Zuri woke early, excited to explore her new surroundings. Tunda took her to a nearby school to inquire about enrollment. Amara stayed behind, trying to convince herself that this life could be real. Her phone rang, an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. Amara, a woman's voice, said smoothly. Her blood ran cold. Mrs. Adeyemi, Amara whispered. I hear you're feeling better, Modupe continued. That's good. I wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen now. Amara's hands trembled. Please, leave us alone. You still don't understand, Modupe said. You don't get to decide when this ends. The line went dead. Amara sank onto the couch, shaking. That night, when Tunda returned, he found her pale and silent. She called Amara, said simply. Tunda's face hardened. Then she's crossed the line. He picked up his phone. I'm done hiding, he said. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Outside the apartment, a car idled quietly before driving away. Someone was watching. Sleep did not come easily that night. Amara lay awake long after Zuri's soft breathing filled the bedroom. Every creak of the apartment, every distant car horn from the street below sent a sharp jolt through her chest. The phone call replayed over and over in her mind, each word spoken by Modupe Adeyemi echoing like a threat carved in stone. You don't get to decide when this ends. Beside her, Zuri turned in her sleep and murmured something unintelligible. Amara reached out instinctively, placing a hand on her daughter's back, grounding herself in the warmth of her small body. By morning, Amara's eyes were dark with exhaustion. Tunde noticed immediately. You didn't sleep, he said as he poured tea in the kitchen. Amara shook her head. She knows where we are. Tunde set the cup down slowly. His expression hardened not with fear, but with something colder and more determined. Then she made her choice, he said. And now I'll make mine. Zuri entered the room just then, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Daddy, she said cheerfully. Can I go to school today? Tunde forced a smile. Soon, my princess, very soon. As Zuri disappeared back into her room, Amara lowered her voice. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to confront her, Tunde replied. Once and for all. Amara's heart clenched. Tunde, please be careful. She doesn't fight fair. Neither do I anymore, he said quietly. Later that morning, Tunde drove alone to the mansion he had once called home. The gates opened as they always had, silent and obedient. The guards recognized him instantly and stepped aside without a word. Yet as he walked through the grand entrance, he felt no familiarity, only distance. Modupe Adeyemi waited in the sitting room, seated perfectly upright, her posture as controlled as her expression. She looked at her son the way one might look at a wayward employee. So she said calmly, You came. I didn't come to argue, Tunde replied. I came to end this. Modupe raised an eyebrow. End what? The fear, the threats, the lies, he said. You crossed a line when you called Amara. Modupe sighed softly as if disappointed. I only wanted to check on her health. That's not true, Tunde snapped. And you know it. She stood slowly, smoothing the front of her expensive dress. You think you're strong now because you have money, she said. But power isn't built in 8 years, Tunde. It's inherited. I don't need your power, he replied. I built my own life. And yet, she said, stepping closer, everything you have still carries this family's name. Tunde met her gaze without flinching. Then let me be clear, he said. Amara and Zuri are my family. If you go near them again, I will expose everything. The threats, the manipulation, all of it. For the first time, Modoop's composure cracked. You wouldn't dare, she said sharply. I would, Tunde replied, and I won't warn you twice. Silence filled the room thick and heavy. Modoop's lips curled into a bitter smile. You would choose them over your own mother. You stopped being my mother the night you threatened my child, Tunde said quietly. He turned and walked away, his steps steady. At the apartment, Amara paced the living room, unable to settle. Zuri sat at the dining table drawing pictures with the colored pencils Tunde had bought her. She held up one proudly. Look, Mommy, she said. This is us. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands. One was taller than the others. Amara smiled despite herself. It's beautiful. The sound of the door opening made her freeze. Tunde stepped inside. It's done, he said. Amara searched his face. What does that mean? It means she knows I won't back down, he replied. And if she's smart, she'll stop. Amara wanted to believe that, but fear had taught her never to underestimate Modupe Adeyemi. That night, a black car parked across the street from the apartment building. Inside, a man watched as the lights in one particular apartment turned off. He made a call. They're settled, he said. The child goes to the window every night before bed. On the other end of the line, Modupe listened in silence. Good, she said finally. Let me know if anything changes. Back inside the apartment, Zuri lay in bed clutching her soft toy. Daddy, she whispered when Tunde came to check on her. Yes, my love, are we safe now? Tunde hesitated, then sat beside her. Yes, he said gently. I won't let anyone hurt you. Zuri smiled sleepily. Okay, but as Tunde turned off the light, a familiar unease settled in his chest. Because deep down, he knew one thing. His mother had never lost a battle before, and she would not accept defeat quietly. Morning arrived with a softness that felt almost unfamiliar. Sunlight spilled through the curtains of the Lekki apartment, touching the walls with a warmth Amara had not felt in years. For a brief moment before memory returned, she allowed herself to believe that life had finally chosen mercy. In the bedroom down the hall, Zuri was already awake. She stood in front of the mirror wearing her new school uniform, smoothing the fabric with careful hands. The shoes on her feet still felt strange, clean, sturdy, untouched by dust. She smiled at her reflection, then turned when she heard footsteps. Daddy, she said brightly, do I look okay? Tunde knelt in front of her, adjusting the collar she had folded crookedly. His chest tightened. This was a moment he had imagined but never believed he would live to see. You look perfect, he said. Zuri beamed. Amara watched from the doorway, her heart full and afraid at the same time. Every smile felt borrowed, like something that could be taken back without warning. The drive to the school was quiet. Zuri pressed her face against the window, watching the city pass by. The school building stood tall and painted in fresh colors, its gate open and welcoming. When they arrived, Zuri's grip on Amara's hand tightened. What if they don't like me, she whispered. Amara bent down, brushing Zuri's hair back. They will, she said gently. And even if they don't, you'll still be brave. Tunde crouched beside them. I'll be right here when school ends. Zuri nodded and stepped through the gate. As they watched her disappear into the crowd of children, something inside Amara loosened just a little. For the first time in years, Zuri was not selling yams. She was simply a child. Back at the apartment, Amara tried to focus on the ordinary. She cleaned. She organized the kitchen. She even hummed softly as she folded clothes. But her hands shook and her eyes kept drifting to the door. The phone rang. Her heart jumped. She stared at the screen. An unknown number. Slowly she answered. Amara, the voice said. Her breath caught. "What do you want? I see you've settled into a nice life," Modupe Adeyemi said calmly. "A good school, a secure estate." Amara's knees weakened. She sat down. "Please," she said, "just leave us alone, I would," Modupe replied, "if you hadn't returned." Amara swallowed. "I didn't come back for you, I came back to survive." "You came back to take what doesn't belong to you," Modupe said sharply. "My son. My name." "I took nothing," Amara said, her voice breaking. "Your son found us." Silence followed. Then Modupe spoke again, slower this time. "You think because he stands beside you now, you're untouchable." The line went dead. Amara stared at the phone in her hand, her whole body trembling. When Tunde returned later that afternoon, he found her sitting exactly where she had been, unmoving. "She called again," Amara said before he could speak. Tunde's face darkened. "I warned her." "She's not stopping," Amara whispered. "She never does." Tunde knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "I'm here. I won't let her scare you back into hiding." Before Amara could reply, the door opened. Zuri burst in, breathless and glowing. "Daddy, Mommy," she shouted, "I made a friend. Her name is Saide." She talked excitedly about her class, her teacher, the playground. Tunde listened, smiling, but Amara watched her daughter closely. Happiness made children careless. That night, after Zuri fell asleep, Tunde received a call from his assistant. "Sir, the man said your mother has been making inquiries about your companies, your accounts." Tunde exhaled slowly. "Let her." "She's trying to apply pressure," the assistant continued. "Board members are nervous." Tunde's jaw tightened. "Tell them I won't bend." When the call ended, Amara looked at him with worry etched deep into her face. "She's going after your work now," she said. "She'll try to destroy you. Then she'll fail," Tunde replied. "I didn't build this life for her approval." Across the city, Modupe Adeyemi sat in her study documents spread across her desk. "They think they've won," she said coldly to the man standing before her. "They forget who taught this family how to fight." The man nodded. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing yet," Modupe replied. "Let them feel safe." Back in the apartment, Zuri stirred in her sleep. She dreamed of schoolyards and laughter. Outside, the black car returned to its familiar place across the street. And inside, Modupe's heart patience sharpened into something far more dangerous. Because she was not finished, not even close. Ket thuk fan ten tiep tuk yo kao viet ju 1000 to 1200 to theo qui jin. Fan 11. The invitation, old wounds reopened and a trap disguised as peace. The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon. It was delivered by a uniformed courier who asked for Tunde Adeyemi by name, bowed politely, and left without a word. The cream-colored paper looked expensive, thick and smooth beneath Tunde's fingers. He already knew who it was from before he opened it. Modupe Adeyemi. Inside was a single card, elegant and restrained. "Dinner, tomorrow evening, family matters, no threats, no accusations, just an invitation." Amara felt the blood drain from her face the moment she read it. "It's a trap," she said immediately, her voice low and urgent. "She's never asked for peace before." Tunde read the card again, his expression unreadable. "She wants me back under her roof," he said. "She wants control. She wants access," Amara corrected softly. "To you. To Zuri." Zuri sat on the floor nearby, drawing quietly. She looked up, sensing the shift in the air. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked. Tunde crouched beside her. "Not you, my love. You'll stay here with the housekeeper." Zuri frowned. "Why? Because grown-ups need to talk," he said gently. That night, Amara barely slept. The past clawed its way back into her thoughts with cruel clarity, the narrow room she once rented, the knock at the door, the cold voice promising death. She had built her entire life around avoiding this woman. Now Modupe was calling her back as if nothing had happened. Tunde Amara whispered in the darkness, "Please don't go." He turned toward her. "If I don't, she'll find another way. At least this way I'm looking her in the eye." The next evening, Tunde arrived alone at the mansion. The gates opened slowly, ceremoniously. Inside, the house glowed with warm light and polished perfection. A long dining table had been set for two. Modupe Adeyemi stood at the head, dressed in white, her hair immaculate, her expression calm. "You came?" she said, as if surprised. "You invited me," Tunde replied. They sat across from each other. For a moment, neither spoke. "I hear the girl has started school," Modupe said casually, pouring wine into her glass. Tunde's eyes hardened. "Her name is Zuri." "Of course," Modupe replied. "Zuri." Silence stretched. "I didn't invite you here to argue," Modupe said at last. "I'm tired of conflict." Tunde laughed softly without humor. "That's new. I'm an old woman," she continued. "I want peace in my family." "You threatened my child," Tunde said flatly. "That kind of peace doesn't exist." Modupe set her glass down slowly. "I did what I thought was necessary at the time." "You tried to erase her," he snapped. "And now you want dinner." Modupe's eyes narrowed. "You think that woman didn't benefit from leaving. She survived. She built a life. She survived because she ran," Tunde replied. "From you." Modupe leaned back in her chair. "Bring the girl to the mansion," she said suddenly. "Let me see her." Tunde stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. "No." "She's my blood," Modupe insisted. "She is my daughter," Tunde said. "And you will never touch her." Across town, Amara sat on the couch, her phone clenched tightly in her hand. Every passing minute felt like a threat. When Tunde finally returned home, his face was pale, his shoulders tight. "She wants to see Zuri," he said. Amara shook her head. "She'll never stop." Tunde sank into a chair. "Then neither will I." Outside, unseen plans were already shifting. Modupe Adeyemi did not believe in losing. She believed in waiting. The days after the dinner invitation passed under a heavy cloud. Nothing happened on the surface. No calls, no messages, no confrontations. Yet the silence itself felt deliberate, like the pause before a storm. Amara sensed it in the way her chest tightened every time the phone vibrated. She saw it in the way Tunde stared out at the city from the balcony, lost in thought, as if measuring invisible threats. Zuri, unaware of the tension wrapping itself around the adults, continued to settle into her new life. She woke early each morning, eager for school. She talked endlessly about her classmates, about Said, who shared her lunch, about a boy who borrowed her pencil and forgot to return it. She came home with dusty shoes and bright stories, laughing freely in a way Amara had not heard in years, and that frightened Amara more than anything. Because happiness made Zuri visible. One afternoon, as Amara waited at the school gate to pick her up, she felt it. The feeling of being watched. She turned slowly, scanning the street. Parents chatted nearby. Cars passed. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the unease remained crawling up her spine. That night she told Tunde, "I think someone followed me," she said quietly. Tunde's jaw tightened. "Are you sure? I've lived in fear for too long to mistake it," Amara replied. "Your mother is testing us." The next morning, Tunde received a call from his company's legal department. "Sir," the lawyer said cautiously, "there's been a sudden audit request. It's coming from very high up." Tunde closed his eyes. "My mother. It appears so." By midday, 2 board members requested an emergency meeting. By evening, an investor pulled out without explanation. Each move was subtle, legal, almost polite. Modupe Adeyemi was not attacking directly. She was tightening the net. At home, Zuri noticed the change. "Daddy," she asked one night, "did I do something wrong?" Tunde knelt beside her bed. "Why would you think that? You and Mommy look sad," Zuri said. "Is it because of me?" Tunde's heart twisted painfully. "No," he said firmly. "Never think that. You are the best thing that ever happened to us." Zuri nodded, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. A week later, the school called. Amara's hands shook as she answered. "Mrs. Amara Adeyemi," the principal asked. "Yes. There's a woman here claiming to be your child's grandmother. She says she wishes to observe the school environment." Amara felt the room spin. "Do not let her near my daughter," she said sharply. "I'm afraid she has already been waiting," the principal replied nervously. "She's very influential." Amara dropped the phone. By the time she and Tunde arrived at the school, Modupe Adeyemi was already standing in the principal's office, calm and composed, her handbag resting neatly on her arm. Zuri sat in a corner, clutching her school bag, confusion written all over her face. Grandmother Zuri whispered uncertainly when she saw Amara. Modupe smiled gently. "Yes, my dear." "No," Amara said, stepping between them. "She is not your grandmother." Modupe's smile faded only slightly. "You can't hide her forever." Tunde stepped forward, his voice cold. "You had no right to come here." "I have every right," Modupe replied. "She carries my blood." "You threatened her life," Tunde said. "That erased any right you had." The principal shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should all calm down. We're leaving," Tunde said. As they walked out, Zuri looked back, once her eyes meeting Modupe's. That single glance was all Modupe needed. That night, Amara packed a bag without saying a word. "What are you doing?" Tunde asked. "We can't stay," she said. "She found her at school. Next time she won't ask permission." Tunde grabbed her hands. "Running won't solve this." "It saved our daughter once," Amara replied. Tunde was silent. He knew she was right, but he also knew that running again would cost them everything they had just begun to build. And somewhere in the city, Modupe Adeyemi sat alone, smiling faintly. Because the child was no longer just a secret. She was leverage. That night, the apartment felt smaller than it ever had before. Amara moved quietly through the rooms, folding clothes with mechanical precision, her hands trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. Zuri sat on the bed, watching her mother with wide, uncertain eyes. She could sense that something was wrong, even if she didn't fully understand it. "Mommy," Zuri said softly, "are we going on a trip?" Amara paused, then forced a smile. "Maybe, my love." Zuri hugged her soft toy closer. "Will Daddy come with us?" Amara's chest tightened. She didn't answer right away. In the living room, Tunde stood near the balcony, staring out at the city lights. The sound of traffic below felt distant, unreal. His phone buzzed again and again, missed calls from board members, messages from his assistant, notifications from a life that was slowly being squeezed by invisible hands. He knew exactly who was responsible. Modupe Adeyemi was not trying to win quickly. She was trying to exhaust him, to make him choose between stability and love, between power and family. Amara stepped into the living room with a small travel bag in her hand. "We need to leave tonight," she said quietly. "Before she comes back to the school, before she uses the police, or worse." Tunde turned to face her. "And go anywhere she can't reach us," Amara replied. "I've done it before, I can do it again." "That's exactly the problem," Tunde said, his voice strained. "You shouldn't have to." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand what it's like to live waiting for a knock on the door." "I do." Silence stretched between them. Zuri stood in the doorway, listening. "Is Grandma angry?" she asked hesitantly. Tunde and Amara both turned toward her. "No," Tunde said quickly. "This isn't about you, but everything feels scary," Zuri said. "I don't want to leave my school, or my friend Said." Amara knelt in front of her daughter and took her small hands. "Sometimes," she said gently, "we have to move to stay safe." Zuri's lower lip trembled. Did I do something bad? No, Amara whispered fiercely. Never. That question broke something inside Tunde. He stood up straight, his indecision finally hardening into resolve. We are not running, he said. Amara looked at him in shock. Tunde, no, he repeated. I won't let my mother chase us out of our own lives again. She will destroy you, Amara warned. Your companies, your reputation, everything you've built. Tunde nodded slowly. Then I'll rebuild it if I have to. But I won't lose my daughter. He walked toward Zuri and crouched in front of her. Listen to me, he said gently. No one is taking you anywhere tonight. This is your home. Zuri searched his face, then nodded. Amara stood frozen, torn between the man she loved and the fear that had kept her alive for years. That same night, Modupe Adeyemi received a report. They're packing, the man on the phone said. But they haven't left yet. Modupe smiled faintly. Good. She rose from her chair and walked toward the window, her reflection staring back at her, elegant, controlled, unyielding. Prepare the documents, she said, and make sure the media is ready. The next morning, the attack came. Headlines began to circulate quietly online. Anonymous tips, carefully worded allegations, questions about Tunde Adeyemi's business ethics, suggestions of impropriety, of hidden scandals. Nothing concrete, nothing provable. Just enough to plant doubt. By midday, Tunde's office phones were ringing non-stop. His assistant's voice shook as she spoke. Sir, the board is calling for an emergency meeting. Schedule it, Tunde replied calmly. At home, Amara watched the news on mute, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She's escalating, she whispered. Tunde nodded. And so am I. That afternoon, he did something he had never done before. He called a press conference. Amara stared at him in disbelief. Are you sure about this? I've spent my whole life protecting my family's image, Tunde said. It's time I protected my actual family. The room fell silent as cameras flashed and microphones were raised. Tunde stood before them, composed but resolute. 8 years ago, he began. The woman I loved disappeared while carrying my child. I searched for them for years. I was told nothing. I was given no answers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Recently, he continued, I found them again. Not through lawyers, not through investigators, but through an 8-year-old girl selling yams to save her mother's life. The room went completely still. I will not apologize for choosing my daughter, Tunde said firmly. And I will not allow anyone, no matter how powerful, to threaten her safety. That evening, Modupe Adeyemi watched the broadcast from her living room, her face unreadable. So she murmured, You've chosen war. Back at the apartment, Zuri sat between her parents, holding their hands tightly. Are we going to be okay? She asked softly. Tunde squeezed her hand. Yes. Amara closed her eyes, leaning into them both. For the first time in years, she did not run. She stayed, even though she knew the hardest part was still ahead. The aftermath of the press conference shook Lagos in quiet, relentless waves. By the next morning, Tunde Adeyemi's name dominated business columns and social feeds. The story spread not as scandal, but as shock. An heir who chose his child over silence, a billionaire who admitted vulnerability instead of hiding behind lawyers. Some praised his courage, others questioned his judgment. But everyone listened. Inside the apartment, Amara watched the city react from behind drawn curtains. Her hands shook as she scrolled through headlines. She had lived too long avoiding attention to feel comfortable in it now. Yet this time, fear mixed with something new, relief. The truth was no longer hers to carry alone. Zuri, unaware of the wider storm, ate her breakfast quietly and asked an ordinary question. Can I go to school today? Amara and Tunde exchanged a glance. Yes, Tunde said gently. I'll take you. At the school gate, parents whispered as they recognized him. Some smiled, Others stared. Zuri squeezed his hand tighter, sensing the attention. "You're famous now," she whispered. Tunda smiled softly. "I've always been your daddy, that's enough for me." Across the city, Modupe Adeyemi sat in her private study. The television muted, the press conference replaying silently. Her composure, so carefully maintained for decades, had begun to crack. The story had not gone the way she expected. She had planned to isolate him, to pressure quietly, to force him back into obedience. Instead, he had stepped into the light. Her phone rang. It was Chief Ogunlai. "The board is nervous," he said. "Your son's statement has changed public sentiment. Investors are asking questions about you." Modupe's jaw tightened. "Questions about what? About the threats?" the chief replied carefully. "About why the mother and child disappeared 8 years ago." Silence stretched. "Control the narrative," Modupe said finally. "Remind them who built this family." But the narrative had slipped beyond her grasp. By midday, a former House staff member came forward anonymously confirming that Modupe had visited a young woman late at night years ago. By evening, a private clinic nurse hinted at unusual payments made around the same time. Small truths accumulated, each too insignificant, alone together impossible to ignore. Back at the apartment, Amara's phone buzzed with a call she never expected. It was Dr. Okoye. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said kindly. "People are talking. The hospital has received inquiries about your case from years ago. Nothing dangerous, just clarity." Amara closed her eyes. "Thank you for telling me." When Tunda returned home, his face carried both exhaustion and resolve. "The board met," he said. "Some stepped down, others apologized. They want transparency." Amara studied him. "And your mother?" Tunda exhaled slowly. "She's been summoned for questioning. Informal for now." That night, Modupe Adeyemi sat alone in the mansion that had once been her fortress. The house felt quieter than ever. For the first time, the walls did not echo her authority. They reflected it back at her hollow. She picked up her phone and dialed Tunda. He answered. "You've made your point," she said, her voice steady but strained. "This has gone far enough." "You went far enough 8 years ago," Tunde replied calmly. "I protected you," she insisted, "from a life beneath you." "You threatened to kill my child," he said. "There's no protection in that." A pause. "What do you want?" Modupe asked. "For you to stop," Tunde said. "And to leave us alone." Silence filled the line. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I built everything you stand on. And I built something better," Tunde replied. "A family." He ended the call. The following days brought a slow reckoning. Modupe Adeyemi withdrew from public appearances. Lawyers issued careful statements. Associates distanced themselves. Power did not disappear overnight, but it shifted visibly, undeniably. At school, Zuri's teacher called Amara aside. "Your daughter spoke today," she said gently, "about courage, about telling the truth." Amara felt tears rise. What did she say? She said the teacher smiled. "Even when you're scared, you can still stand." That evening, the family sat together on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, alive and forgiving. Tunde looked at Amara. "I should have protected you sooner." She shook her head. "You're here now. That's what matters." Zuri climbed onto his lap, holding both their hands. "Are we a real family now?" she asked. Tunde kissed her forehead. "We always were. The world just didn't know." As the night settled around them, the shadows that once loomed so large began to shrink, not because they vanished, but because the truth had finally outgrown them. The city slowly exhaled. After weeks of tension, whispers, and watching eyes, Lagos returned to its restless rhythm. Cars filled the roads again, markets buzzed, life moved forward. But for one family, everything had changed quietly, deeply, permanently. Modupe Adeyemi did not go to prison. Power rarely falls that cleanly, but she lost something far more important. Her influence fractured. Longtime allies withdrew. Invitations stopped coming. Board members she once controlled with a glance now spoke to her through lawyers. The mansion that had once felt like a throne room became unbearably silent. For the first time in her life, Modupe sat alone with her thoughts, and there was no one left to silence them. Across the city, in a sunlit apartment in Lekki, Amara stood at the kitchen window watching Zuri pack her school bag. "Mommy, hurry," Zuri called out. "I don't want to be late." Amara smiled, a real smile this time. "I'm coming." Zuri ran to the door, then stopped suddenly and turned back. "Mommy," she asked, her voice thoughtful. "Are we still poor?" Amara paused. She knelt in front of her daughter, meeting her eyes. "We don't have everything," she said gently, "but we have enough. And we have each other." Zuri considered this, then nodded. "That's better." Tunda watched from the doorway, his heart full in a way success had never given him before. The company recovered. Not immediately, not easily, but steadily. Investors returned not because of fear or legacy, but because of trust. Tunda restructured the board, brought in independent voices, and did something unheard of in his family's history. He made everything transparent. He worked harder than he ever had. Not to impress, not to dominate, but to protect. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Amara broke the comfortable silence. "I don't want to hide anymore," she said. Tunda looked at her. "You don't have to." "I want to work again," she continued. "Not because we need the money, but because I want my life to be mine too." Tunde nodded immediately. "Whatever you want." And so Amara returned to school. She enrolled in evening classes, studying hospitality management, the path she had once abandoned in fear. Every night, Zuri sat beside her at the table doing homework while her mother studied. "We're classmates," Zuri joked one night. Amara laughed, tears in her eyes. "Yes, we are." Months passed. Zuri grew taller, stronger. Her laughter filled rooms that once echoed with fear. She stopped flinching at sudden noises. She stopped looking over her shoulder. Slowly, carefully, she learned that safety could last. One afternoon, she came home with a drawing. It showed 3 figures standing under a tree. "What is it?" Amara asked. "It's us," Zuri said. "Before and after." Amara pulled her into a hug. The past still existed. Some nights Amara woke from dreams where doors slammed and footsteps followed. Some days Tunde felt the old anger rise when he thought of what had been stolen from them. But those moments no longer ruled their lives. 1 year later, on a quiet evening, Tunde stood on the same balcony where they had once sat in fear. He turned to Amara. "I can't give you back the years we lost," he said softly. "But I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. Every day." Amara stared at him, emotion tightening her throat. "You already have," she said. He reached into his pocket and knelt. Zuri gasped. "Yes," Amara whispered through tears before he even finished. The wedding was small. No headlines, no spectacle, just friend sunlight and a child who walked between them, holding both their hands. Zuri wore a simple dress and smiled the entire day. At the reception, she stood on a chair and raised her glass of juice. "To my mommy," she said proudly, "and my daddy. Thank you for not giving up." There was not a dry eye in the room. Far away in a quiet mansion that no longer felt powerful, Modupe Adeyemi watched a photograph on her phone, one she had not been invited to take. A family, whole, free. For the first time, she understood the cost of control, and it was too late. That night, as Zuri lay between her parents, she whispered sleepily, "I like our life." Amara kissed her forehead. "So do I." Tunda turned off the light. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, a family rested, no longer defined by fear, wealth, or power, but by something far stronger. Love chosen, truth spoken, and a future finally claimed. Life does not always reward the loudest, the richest, or the most powerful. Sometimes it quietly honors the brave, the ones who choose truth even when silence feels safer, the ones who protect love when fear demands surrender. This story reminds us that kindness, courage, and integrity are not weaknesses. They are forces. An 8-year-old girl did not change her world with money or influence, but with honesty and determination. A mother survived not because she was fearless, but because she chose her child over comfort. And a man became whole the moment he stopped protecting an image and started protecting his family. Real wealth is not what you control. It is who you refuse to abandon. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from, and what part of the story stayed with you the most? Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of love, justice, and healing. Your support helps these stories travel further, because somewhere someone needs to hear that it's never too late to choose what truly matters. John Juan Tat Kichbon, Viet Wan Joan 200 to 300 to Donkit Bai Hok. Kuok Song Sau Sak Kam Jong Truyan Kam Hung. Kem Siti Atun Yen Keo Goi Bain Luan Kam Nhan Va Jung Ki Kern Bang Tiengan. Yu Kao Kong Viet and Jam Kong Tam Ikon Emoji Vao Noi Dung. Life does not always break us to punish us. Sometimes it breaks us to reveal who we truly are. This story is not just about poverty and wealth or power and fear. It is about choices. A child chose courage instead of despair. A mother chose protection instead of comfort. A father chose responsibility instead of silence. And in those choices, a broken family found its way back to truth. Many people believe that safety comes from hiding, that survival means staying quiet and accepting injustice. But this story reminds us that real healing begins when we stop running from our pain and start standing for what matters. Love is not proven by words, money, or promises. It is proven by action, by sacrifice, and by the willingness to face consequences for the people we care about. This story also teaches us that the past does not own us forever. Even when years are stolen, even when fear shapes our lives, there is still a moment when we can say, "It ends here." And when we do, the future changes. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. What part touched your heart the most? Was it the child's bravery, the mother's sacrifice, or the father's awakening? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might inspire someone who is struggling silently. If you believe stories like this matter, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Together we can keep sharing stories that heal, awaken, and remind us that choosing love is always worth it.